We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Lindsay Patterson, Mike Santagata here for you this week. Mike, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. It's weird to record these back to back because of, you know, I think pretend we're not recording this the next day. Um, Moved on to Cavs basketball. They're 19-3. That's
Must be
where I
nice.
am. Yeah, that's where I am. It's good to have a team that's good.
Yep. Yep. Good for you. We're happy for you. Yeah, it's getting cold in Cincinnati. They actually are canceling school in some of the areas because it's going to be so cold tomorrow.
Oh,
So it's that time
is
of
that like
year.
COVID related that they do that now instead of? I feel like I don't want to be a boomer, but I feel like I needed like 2 feet of snow for school to be canceled.
Oh no, it's cold weather. That's just what it is. But no, I agree with you. I definitely probably. But hey, you know what? Good for those kids. They're getting kind of like a semi snow day in December, but it's just a cold day. But yeah, that's what's happening in Cincinnati. It's a pretty quiet week. We are recording this little behind the scenes magic here. We were recording this on a Wednesday. The Cincinnati Bengals practice on a Thursday. But I'll start with some news. Evan McPherson, they're going to put him on the IR for 4 games, which again, there's only going to be 1 game left after that. So I'll be surprised if we see Evan McPherson the rest of the year. There are reports out there. We'll see what happens when the team returns to practice on Thursday. Logan Wilson might be done for the year. Orlando Brown Jr. could be done for the next couple games, or maybe they shut him down for the season because the Cincinnati Bengals have about a 3% chance of extending their season beyond the Pittsburgh Steelers game the last week of the season. So it's pretty much over. They're not tanking. I know a lot of people are assuming, oh, the Bengals are tanking. NFL teams players won't tank. They're still going to play. Joe Burrow is still going to play. Jamar Chase is still going to play. T. Higgins is still going to play. So it's just unfortunate. I think it's a smart idea for some of these guys who maybe they need surgery. They would have probably played through it if the team had a better record. So I kind of understand it. But any thoughts on Evan being shut down?
I want to see him come back because I want him to kind of spin his season around. I know some people have said like, yeah, just get your mind right and take the rest of the year off. But I feel like the best thing for him would be if he came back and was like perfect down the stretch or something, and just then you could feel confident in him being a good kicker next season. Where like right now, I don't know if you can feel that way. I think you just who knows.
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree with you. One of the things I wanted to see in these next 5 games would be Evan McPherson. And, there's not a whole lot of pressure on you because this season isn't going to go. I mean, they have 5 games left. So I just felt like he could have taken that time to get that confidence. But unfortunately, it sounds like the injury happened in the Pittsburgh Steelers game. I think it'll be telling to see how it works out for Cade York, who hasn't really had a lot of success after being drafted by the Cleveland Browns. So we'll see what that looks like. But yeah, just an unfortunate turn of events for some of the players. Hopefully these guys can come back healthy. We'll see what Evan McPherson's future looks like as they get to training camp next year. But unfortunate season for him. And as they get back to practice on Thursday, we'll have a little more to tell on who's going to be good to go for Monday Night Football versus the Cowboys. We'll have predictions in just a moment. We decided to do a little mailbag because I know everybody has some thoughts right now. So we'll first start with the first question. Am I crazy to have hope that there will be big changes in the front office?
A little. I don't see him happening. Your best bet would be that Duke steps down and Trey Brown takes over, but right, like I mean, maybe you know this question better than me, but when I think of that, I think like they're not going to just fire Duke. I don't think he's been here forever, and I also don't know how coveted this job would be if they did try to fire him, try to go hire somebody. The real thing with the front office is the ownership, and that's not changing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I know a lot of people want to say, fire this guy, fire this guy. Look, I'm not against that at all. I think that your technically GM of Duke Tobin should be held accountable for some of the decisions and the draft picks that players that they've drafted and ownership too. But at the same time, whoever they bring in here, I don't really feel like he's going to have a whole lot of say into personnel moves or anything that's really happening. So I don't really know if another voice is going to make a huge difference. And that's really sad how they operate in their front office. And I wish it was different. I wish they did have a GM that was thinking from the outside. Duke's been here forever. And really, not a whole lot has changed except for the last few years when they started to spend some money in free agency. And that's about it. That's about it. That's all I can really tell from the front office moves over the last couple of years. So I'm not expecting any moves. I agree with you for Trey Brown. He is an underrated guy in the front office. I know he's had a couple interviews for other NFL jobs and GM jobs around the league. But yeah, I don't expect a change when it comes to front office moves.
Yeah.
Next question. Can you two elaborate more on what you like about Dennis Allen? This was a question I saw from a friend of ours over on Twitter when we put out the mailbag questions, and I know you mentioned it on the podcast earlier this week, but I'm going to let you elaborate because I know Dennis Allen was your guy.
Yeah, I was actually going to throw in the second half of that
Do it.
as well. If I can just find it real quick. Oh, dang, thought that was it. But I know he also mentioned he had three other guys that were former head coaches, and Mike Pettin, Matt Eberflus, and Robert Saleh. And I figured it'd be cool to give like just a quick breakdown on all of that and why I think I prefer Dennis Allen over all of that. So I think I'd order it Allen, Saleh, Eberflus, Pettin. And I wouldn't despise any of these. I'll start with Mike Pettin. Break down this defense. It's more aggressive. It's attacking. Gives up some stuff in the run game. He's almost bizarro Lou Anarumo, not schematically, but just in his results, where he's put together some pretty good regular season performances, and then he just gets absolutely pounded in the playoffs at times, where it's 40-something point games given up in the playoffs. I think multiple times to the 49ers. So it's kind of like the opposite of Lou, where it's like, yeah, Lou might get cooked once or twice in the regular season when he's got his guys, but when, like the playoffs come, he's putting together the best game plans you've seen against some of these guys. Just the high level thing, I just look at points. I mean, points is the most important thing. He's a Rex Ryan guy. That's where he comes from. He was 9th or 13th in points his last year in Green Bay, 9th. And then before that, 22nd, 29th. I don't know if he raises a floor. One was actually Cleveland. So I was just looking 22nd. Don't count the 29th, but 22nd, 9th, and 13th. I don't know if he raises a floor. I don't know what the ceiling is. I really struggle with a guy that hasn't coached since 2020, who hasn't been a play caller since then, because I just look at what Mike Zimmer, who I thought was an incredible coach, is doing this year in Dallas. Not much good. Multiple defense, aggressive, attacking. That would be my high-level breakdown of him. Then moving to Matt Eberflus, used to be a cover two guy, 4 down lineman, does a lot more different, disguises things. I think my issue with him is just it's another one of when he got to Chicago in 2022, he had the worst defense in the league, 32nd in points, 9th this year, and they were 20th last year. Went on a heater after the Sweat trade, and even in Indy, he was flirting around top 10 most years. So I'm not opposed to this, but I think I look at that. It's the 32nd in Chicago finish that scares me. Of just like, I don't think you're going to have a lot of talent year one. Maybe that's not what matters. Maybe it's just about getting a guy in here that can coach and elevate a team. I haven't seen him in the playoffs, I think, much at all with Indy either. So I don't have anything to go on there, where I'm hoping to find a guy that can coach to the playoffs. Robert Saleh, I think, is the guy you know the best. He's got, like, I think the best, I don't know about the best, but he's got the most defined system to me, where it's 4 down linemen. They're aggressive, firing off the ball. All these guys are actually pretty aggressive. Eberflus is probably the least aggressive, but even he is having his defensive lineman fire off the ball. There's just not a blitzing with him. Saleh, not a lot of blitzing either. 4 down, quarters, cover 3. Doesn't really delve into a lot of other stuff, but he's very good at teaching it. You can look at his performances where 15th, 12th, 4th in points. Again, he had a 32nd finish with the Jets. So otherwise, just go like, He was 28th and 25th with the 49ers as well. I think we forget some of those stinkers he's put out there, which is fine. Like, you can have stinkers. Not everybody's going to be a great coach every year, or put out a great product every year. But he's kind of a little bit hesitant. But I think he could also be a good defensive coordinator. I think, what he did in San Francisco was impressive with what they had. And then when he gets talent, he's obviously very good. The reason I'm into Dennis Allen is because I think he does it without the talent. Now, I know if you go back in the past, he's had some stinkers. 31st finish in 2016. But that was 2016. Since then, 10th, 14th, 13th, 5th, 4th, 9th, 8th, 19th. I don't think this Saints defense on paper has been that impressive. He's another guy, 4 down. I think all these guys, except for Pettin, mixes around. They're almost all 4 down defensive linemen. So 2 defensive tackles, 2 defensive ends, 4-3 if you want to call it that. But they major in that. I think Dennis Allen is unique. He plays a lot of match stuff on the back end that he was doing before. A lot of other guys adapted it, man match type stuff back there. But he also does a great job of designing blitzes. I think out of these guys, him or Pettin would be the best at designing blitzes. And it's just Pettin hasn't been a coach in 4 years. So I looked at Allen as a guy that I know can still do that. Because when I thought of Zimmer, I thought he was like, hey, we would think like awesome blitz designer. And it's like, well, that hasn't translated too much in Dallas. So I think Dennis Allen, unique, aggressive. He's gotten high quality performances despite not always having a high end talent. I think when I watch his defenses, I come away impressed, thinking for the most part, I think this year maybe you'd point to it as a little bit like, but it wasn't bad. It was just average. But for the most part, I think I come away thinking like, yeah, this guy has a system and he has the ability to game plan and take things away from people. Did a great job against Tom Brady back when he was in Tampa. Another guy, and I should have looked a little bit more into this, but I feel like his playoff performances were pretty good. I'm going to try to take a quick peek here. But yeah, I gave up 26 to the Rams and lost 26.
26? That sounds great right now. This sounds great.
Right. Well, like I'm not seeing like the thing that scares me with Pettin is like the 40-point playoff bombs. Like I don't want to see that. I don't want to go into a playoff game that looks like the current Bengals regular season game on defense. So none of those. Didn't give up 30 points in any playoff game. I quickly perused. Maybe it's just liking his style of defense. He gets his linebackers playing aggressive. They run a lot of cross dog blitzes. Haven't seen a lot of those in Cincinnati where one linebacker is going to come across and hit the center. The other linebacker will wrap around him on a blitz. Even watching him this year, I love his blitz package where he's going to get 2 guys on the back. He's going to get somebody in through that line, which I think is something that Lou has struggled with this season. Just being able to design something so you have a free runner. You have a guy that isn't going to be blocked. You don't rely on anybody winning. You're going to win this because of the design of the defense. And it does it in some funky ways at times where he blitzes guys from depth. But there's some man coverage in there. I think he's aggressive. I think he has done a good job given the talent that his teams have had, where I don't think he's had a lot of dudes the past couple of years, and he's still putting out top 10 defenses. Where if I think of the Saints defense, like, and I try to count down like guys on my finger, like who on this defense is awesome? Demario Davis. And I struggle to come up with a second name because Cam Jordan hasn't been awesome in a couple of years. He's been old. Marshawn Lattimore, I think you'd point to those 2. And then after that, it's a lot of average for the most part. And whether it's him or not, I view him as getting a lot out of these defensive linemen too, where Trey Hendrickson didn't have the snaps, but developed there. And he's there for a lot of those developments. Marshawn Lattimore development, and that's a corner. But Demario Davis and Pete Werner, I think the linebackers might be the biggest part, which you could also say about Lou. But yeah, anyway, I'm into it because I think he raises the floor pretty high. I think that he plays a style of defense that's a bit different than the rest of the league, which is useful. I think when you have a Robert Saleh, who a lot of people are playing 4-down quarters, people are going to have a lot of beaters for that when you get into like a game plan specific game, like a playoff game or just a big divisional game at the end of the year to decide a division. And they're trying to come up with that. You can look across the league and find answers to Robert Saleh's defense. But if you want to find an answer to Dennis Allen's defense, you have to look at Dennis Allen games for the most part, because there's not a lot of guys coaching like him. I like the uniqueness, the aggressiveness, and the ability to raise a floor. Well, I think also being able to have a ceiling to it as well.
Awesome. Mike's all in on Dennis Allen. And I would say there's probably a 90% chance the Cincinnati Bengals
None of this matters.
Well, no. I just 90% chance they're going to have a new defensive coordinator in the offseason.
Yeah. Like this is more useful, I think, than having a conversation about the like head coaches, because I'm more at like a 10% chance there's a new head coach next year, but 90% chance there's a new defensive coordinator next year just because of how this has gone.
Yep, and I think it's more than that. I think you look at your defensive line coach, you're going to look at your secondary coaches, all of that. You need to develop the talent. There's still a lot of young guys on this roster, and getting the most out of these players is what they need right now. So we'll see what that looks like, and I'm sure we'll have that conversation in about 4 to 5 weeks again. Our next Twitter question in the mailbag is, in hindsight, which free agents, I liked this question, would you have rather signed instead of Geno Stone and Sheldon Rankins?
I mean, you can commonly point to, I think your two obvious hindsight ones would be Xavier McKinney at safety instead, who's one of the league leaders in interceptions. And then, I mean, Reader, obviously. Calais Campbell, I think, would be an answer for defensive tackle. Tyre Tart, if they just let him stay in the building. It's almost like if you kept Reader and then also just signed Puna Ford, you could have done any of these guys instead of Rankins, and then maybe you're not reaching on McKinley Jackson, or maybe you feel comfortable enough in your defensive tackle room that you don't have to go with Chris Jenkins. You can go grab somebody else that you believe is worth that pick. So I think those would be guys I'd look at immediately as who would I have rather signed. Do you have anybody you can think of?
No, I think you bring up a good point when it comes to Reader. I think it's so easy to look back on that moment, because I'm very much guilty of when they decided not to sign Reader, because it was a really cheap deal for Detroit. And obviously he was coming off of a not healthy season and a surgery, and he's looked awesome. And unfortunately, he's out for the Thursday night game. He hurt his knee, or hurt some part of shoulder. I had knee in my brain for Logan Wilson. Hurt his shoulder. So hopefully he bounces back and he's good to go the rest of the way. But I think obviously watching what he's doing in Detroit is a piece that is still missed. And I thought, maybe it makes sense, Sheldon Rankins. But I do think it is kind of ridiculous. I'll say this about the front office and what they've been able to do is they continue to just bring in these free agents. Well, not all of them, but some of them who've had good games against the Cincinnati Bengals. And that is just so telling, because that just proves, like, scouting department, your development, who else is in the front office watching these guys? Or are you just watching the tape of the players you're playing against? Because Geno Stone, I think you can look at his defensive coordinator, and even Marcus Williams, over in Baltimore right now, you look at the safety group and they're playing their defense and how they're struggling. And obviously their defensive coordinator wanted the Seahawks to be the head coach, and just how big of a deal it was for Geno Stone to just be in a good place at a good time with a good defensive coordinator and other pieces who were hitting at the same time. And he comes here and he's a liability for this team. Sheldon Rankins, it feels like highway robbery right now, and I hope he's okay. I know he's dealing with a really serious illness. Hopefully he's okay and he can get back out there. But even when he was out there, it was brutal. It was terrible. So for the Cincinnati Bengals, I just want them to get proven athletic guys. Be smart about it. Don't get the player because he's had a good game against you. Think outside of the box. Think of other positions, and they should be open for every position right now. When you look at the defensive side of the ball, every position is currently open. The linebacker, anybody on the defensive line, safety play has to be open, because I don't trust their youth right now. And that's no offense to Jordan Battle or Dejon Anthony, because we can't see Dejon Anthony right now. And then you're gonna have Dax Hill, DJ Turner, all coming off injuries. So in the cornerback room. So I don't know. Defense is a mess. And I know that didn't really answer your question, but I guess I would go the softball easy answer of, yeah, you probably should have brought DJ Reader back.
Okay.
Next question. I'm just upset about it. What is your assessment of Dan Pitcher at this point in the season?
I think he's been good. He doesn't call plays, so it's kind of where I was with Brian Callahan, where I'm like, the offense works, and he's a part of that. That's kind of it. Like, I think he's doing good for what he does, apparently, but we don't really know what he does 100%.
I agree. It's so hard to assess the offense right now, because there are things this offense still needs to work on in the offseason. And I don't even mean the offense, really. I mean more of the players, and maybe this is free agency, maybe it is the draft. When you think of the interior, you're going to have to upgrade the interior. I want 2 guys, but I only expect them to possibly get 1. I would want to move on from Volson and Kappa, but those are 2 spots that you're going to have to fill. And then you would have a run game. And obviously what Joe Burrow hides is crazy. He plays quarterback on a very hard mode. And again, people do not realize that when he's out there at the quarterback position. Yes, he has T. Higgins. Yes, he has Jamar Chase. Sometimes he only has one or the other. But outside of that, not a lot of help when it comes to weapons. Obviously, Mike Gesicki has stepped up this season. So it's really hard to assess how the offensive coordinator is it Zach Taylor? Is it Dan Pitcher? Is it the quarterback coach? What else outside of Joe Burrow doing what he can as Superman out there is credit to the coaches. So I don't know. Dan Pitcher is well liked around the league. So, I mean, he's had 2 years of head coaching interviews, one where they didn't let him get on the plane because they gave him the promotion.
Offensive coordinator interviews. I don't think those weren't head coaching interviews.
I mean, offensive coordinator, my bad. Offensive coordinator. But, I think he's well liked around the league to be in that role. So, I don't know. He's been on the staff since Marvin Lewis.
Yeah, I think he's been great.
So, that's all we got. Not a whole lot, but I'm fine with him. Would you trade Trey for 2 mid-second rounders and 2 mid-fourth rounders?
I guess. And my only answer is I guess because I don't want to, but if it was up to me, I would just use the money you have, give Trey a little pay bump and extend T, but I don't think they do either one of those things. No. So I don't think I would do it for anything less than a second though, for either guy. Like if it was a third, I've heard some people float that around. It's like, yeah. I don't see the point.
I would trade T for a third round and a player. 100%. I think the perfect thing.
The market's big enough. You shouldn't need to trade him for a third rounder
and a player. I'm trying to
functional defensive tackle.
I want a defensive tackle. Look. Titans just had unfortunately, they just had an injury to one.
Okay, you're not getting a third and Jeffrey Simmons. You are sending the third to get Jeffrey Simmons.
No, we're gonna swap. we're gonna
swap. Maybe.
You're right. None of this is gonna happen. Here's what I want to happen. I agree with you. Here's what I want to happen, and here's what I think is a possibility of happening. I want them to tag and trade T. Higgins. I do. I know we talk all the time about extending him, and that's fine, but I really don't think that's going to happen. I want them to tag and trade T, get a high pick. I think you would get a second rounder. I think you get a second rounder for him. Maybe first. First.
I think you get a first. Team's desperate. Yeah, you probably got to do it before the draft, because after the draft or during the draft, teams are going to go, no, we love this guy that we got. I can think of, I would say the Jags are probably very interested before the draft, and then they get Brian Thomas Jr. and it's like, well, now we don't care. We don't care anymore. So if you're going to strike on like the Titans and they have a high pick, you want to do it before the draft, because they draft, one of these wide receivers, even in the second round. Anybody who drafted a guy in the second round is probably going like, no, we'll just play this guy, or the third round even. I think that happened a little bit to Boyd, where maybe you don't care about that because T. Higgins is T. Higgins. But I feel like the Steelers may have been interested in Boyd until they got Roman Wilson in the third round. They thought, oh, well, Roman Wilson can beat Boyd. And it's not like Boyd's actually been good in Tennessee. So like that's part of it. But I think of that with T, where it's like you want to get this guy traded before the draft. You could mess around with the idea of like trading him on draft night to a team that just gets burned. Like, maybe how the Bengals felt they were with Kincaid. It's like, maybe you just fire that to like, hey, maybe you didn't get Kincaid, but why don't you take this? And it's T. Higgins. But yeah, I think before the draft though, just kind of get to a team before they are able to cope themselves into thinking their draft pick is going to be awesome.
So even if say a team doesn't give you what you want in the second, because the Bengals will want like obviously the highest they can possibly get for him, and I would say second or a late first rounder. If you do not, I could see the Cincinnati Bengals tagging him for another year and just keeping him on board because they have the money. They have the money. I know they have the money to extend him, but they would have the money to do it again.
I think that's fine in a vacuum. I don't think the team will be good enough to compete next year unless they hit a home run in the offseason. But when I look at it, you have the money. It's just I am so going to look back and be like, what was the cost of 2 tags versus just extending him 3 years or 4 years or whatever extension he ends up getting?
Look at the Jesse Bates thing. How much money and resources they've used to replace Jesse Bates, and it would have
For
just
sure.
been 20 times easier to just extend Jesse Bates and have it all over. But again, they went the wrong route. So, and I think they'll put a little more money on Trey Hendrickson. They're going to try to keep Trey. Again, they have the money to do all of those things. We'll just see what happens. But we'll move on because that's a topic that's I'm already exhausted with. What's your opinion on the national media saying Joe Burrow shares some of the blame for this season?
Who cares? I don't listen to that.
No, I think they want to have a topic to argue. And what? You talk about Joe Burrow, people are gonna be like, "What? What'd you say?" Which if it was another quarterback out there who doesn't bring so much attention as playing like the number one quarterback in the NFL right now, and his team was playing bad, I see comparisons of, oh, Patrick Mahomes has been able to carry his team with a bad defense before. That's just a terrible comparison when you look at those rosters and the coaching. Coaching matters on defensive side of the ball, offensive side of the ball, head coach. He's a Hall of Famer. I hate those comparisons to where the Cincinnati roster is on the defensive side of the ball. It's terrible. It's one of the worst defenses I've ever watched, and I've watched the Cincinnati Bengals for a really long time.
The dumb thing to me is just like I've listened to some of this garbage before, and it's like when Shannon Sharp is comparing it to Peyton Manning and then says, well, Peyton lost 48-0. It's like, well, he's lost the plot. Like Burrow's not losing 48-0. He's losing 48-43. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just dumb and they need a talking point. The sooner you're able to just ignore that stuff, the better for your mental health. Just be able to go like, oh, that guy's stupid, and then just keep moving.
Yeah.
Or maybe not stupid, but that guy's not informed, or he's not making a good faith evaluation here. Move on.
I think you can always ask yourself, did I wake up this morning and wonder what Shannon Sharp was saying about my quarterback? I mean, I can only get through this day until I hear what he had to say. And at the end of the day, you have your eyeballs, and you can watch what Joe Burrow's doing, and he's having an insane year. And honestly, that's what we've talked about on this podcast before. That's why this season is so frustrating because of what Joe Burrow is doing out there. If he was still coming back from the wrist injury and he was kind of struggling out there, and it was just, look, this is a down year. It's not working out for the offense. It's not working out for the defense. I would almost be like, all right, I get it. Let's see what next year, brings. But it's just he's playing at an insane level, one of his best, if not best, in the NFL. And it's unfortunate. So that's frustrating. We'll get to our next question. Who are some realistic options at guard the Bengals could sign in free agency?
I think they'll be interested in Tevin Jenkins. Now, I'm not sure I'm on board with them 100%, but that feels like a guy they'd be interested in who's young. I think that might cost more than people are thinking.
Okay.
He's not going to be guard one in free agency, so maybe he doesn't break the bank. But when I'm looking at like Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt making $20 million a year, and I think he's probably on par with Robert Hunt. And just last year, everything exploded. Jonah Jackson makes $17 million. He's benched now. Mm-hmm. Kevin Dotson makes $16 million a year. Damian Lewis makes $13.2 million a year. And when I look at that, I think, is Tevin Jenkins going to be pushing for $20 million a year? Very possible. So that's where my first trepidation. I have a little bit more just in terms of I don't know if he's 100% a good fit, but I think they'll be interested. They might be interested in like a Will Hernandez who's still under 30. You're probably not looking at Trey Smith as much as I would love them to. I just don't think you are. I think you are looking a tier below that. Maybe they go into like the Evan Brown market. He's a stopgap type of guard. You could think of Will Fries in Indianapolis, another guy they could be taking a peek at. But I think Tevin Jenkins would be the big guy they look at. I just think his market might be bigger than we've let on. And then after that, it's not that great out there in free agency. Like getting a guy like Will Fries is fine. I don't think he's a world beater, but I think he's all right. Getting a guy like Will Hernandez, kind of similar feel where it's like he's fine. It's not going out there just because I know the Bengals. I just don't think they'll be able to pay for Trey Smith or want to. They can. I don't think they'll want to. I think that's the biggest issue.
I think Kansas City will extend him.
Maybe. I'm not sure. Like
I don't think
if
so.
people are so up in arms about the Bengals paying 2 wide receivers, how do you feel about Kansas City paying top money to 3 interior offensive linemen?
It's a good question. It's a good question. And you know what? There are times they do their front office does make good business decisions. They usually move off of a player a year before, and then they go to another place and they have a
Not always
terrible
a great
season.
decision. Look what their left tackle situation has been since
Oh,
Brown left.
their left tackle situation is brutal.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. Like their tackles. You watch Patrick Mahomes against the Raiders, and that guy was running for his life. Interior is solid, but their tackle situation. So no, you bring up a good point. Maybe he isn't there. And the thing that I'm gonna say this, and then I want to move on to our next Twitter question. Then we'll give our prediction for the game. The Cincinnati Bengals in my lifetime have yet to value the guard position. So I am not expecting them to put a lot of effort and money into it. I still expect them to kind of get that kind of middle of the ground
Yeah.
guard who's available. I don't think it's going to be splashy or anything like that. And it really bums me out because you'll never believe this, but they could have had Kevin Zeitler still here
They
playing
could have
interior.
had yeah, they could have. They could have also had Joe Tooney. They would have made a real offer.
It's just you should value the interior. Interior is absolutely huge. If they had an interior offensive line that was good because Joe Burrow covers everything up, they could run the ball too. And it would help your quarterback out a little bit so he's not running for his life and just doing everything off script. I think the Bengals front office needs to value the interior position this offseason. I
I
just
just
don't.
looked at the PFF grade. Will Fry is great in the 80s. That's crazy. I have to look at that. I have to go watch what's
All
going
right,
on.
all right. So
Maybe
I
that's the guy they can get.
I do hope they change their mindset on that too. Because obviously, yes, we talk about the defensive issues and the players they need to get in free agency, or maybe they need to hit on them in the draft because they do need to hit on the draft picks this year. But I want them to value the interior. And that's just one thing that I don't trust that the front office is ready to do yet.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I wasn't naming a lot of high end guys. Dalton Reisner might be another guy, but they've passed on him before. So where I
Yeah.
really land is like Tevin Jenkins, Will Fries, Will Hernandez. I think those are the 3 guys they'll look at. I assume Jenkins will get outpriced, and then you're looking at Will Hernandez, Will Fries.
All right. We'll see what that looks like. We'll get to our next Twitter question. Is there a chance Jamar Chase won't sign an extension given the state of the Cincinnati Bengals?
I guess there's always a chance, but I don't expect it to be a realistic one.
No, I agree. I would say the percentage of that would be 5%, just because I have to give a percentage, and I'll never say never. But no, Jamar Chase is going to be the highest paid wide receiver. Hopefully as soon as March hits. I don't want them waiting too long, and I want them to get it over with. Don't get into camp. But yeah, Jamar Chase will sign an extension with the Cincinnati Bengals, and hopefully he's here and Joe Burrow are here for another decade or so. We'll see what that looks like. But those conversations should hopefully get wrapped up as soon as the season's over, but I don't expect them to get wrapped up as soon as possible. They'll take it all the way to July 1st. All right, that is our Twitter mailbag questions. We actually had a lot more than that, and I only had to get a few in there because we are doing a prediction for the Monday Night Football game, Cincinnati Bengals, Dallas Cowboys. It really kind of brings back that 2020 Monday Night Football, the Muffet Bowl or whatever that was
Muppet
happening.
Night Football. Yep.
Yeah, except Joe Burrow is actually playing in this game, and even almost like the Jags game from last year. The Jake Browning game, they ended up going to overtime with them. They beat the Jags. It was crazy. That's what this Monday Night Football game is giving me for vibes. I'm not nervous. I do not care if they win or lose. If they lose, it probably helps their draft pick a little more. They're not going to the postseason. I just want everyone to stay healthy. That's honestly the only thing I want to get from this football game. And I hope Joe Burrow throws for like 700 yards and he has 7 touchdowns. That's really all I want to see out of this game. But it's kind of crazy when I looked at it on the schedule when they released the schedule. I thought, wow, this game could be really huge. It's Monday Night Football. We're gonna have two good quarterbacks facing off against each other on the road. All eyes on them. And then this is where we're at. Both teams having a very failure of a season. And yeah, Mike, what do you think is going to happen in this game?
I don't think the Cowboys injury report is going to be sufficient, but I am going to take a peek at it and see. Yeah, it would be better to be able to do that tomorrow. Okay, they don't even have anybody on the week 14 thing yet. Look at week 13. What their tight end missed with Jake Ferguson and Zach Martin missed. I don't know. I think you're going to end up walking away from this game, and there will be a lot of people saying like, "Oh man, Cooper Rush could probably start a lot of places, couldn't he?" That's the first thought I think is that Cooper Rush probably could have a good game. If I
I've
had to
watched the
predict.
legend before. I mean, I've seen this with my own eyes.
I've seen this Bengals versus Cooper Rush game before, and this time the Bengals defense is worse. Bengals being favored by 5.5 in Dallas is crazy to me. Like the
They don't
betting
really have a
line,
home field there, to be honest.
the betting lines are just giving you so much money for Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. Like I think you would make a lot of money betting against them. It's been true the last few times.
I do it. I jinx bet against the Bengals because I think it's going to make me feel better because I always want them to win the game, but I jinx bet against them, and I've won pretty good money on these jinx bets all season long because Vegas loves the Bengals, and
Yeah,
that's
I
all I
think they're
got.
probably Ben Baldwin always puts out like the ratings, and they're in like the same tier as like lower end playoff teams right now. I
Yeah,
was like, this is 4-8, man. Like, are they really in that tier?
they have them
I,
on the
I know,
graphic.
yeah, Burrow's awesome and Chase is awesome. And the offense is awesome. This defense is so bad. Any team is in these games as long as they have a quarterback that is a certain level of competency. I think Cooper Rush is going to hit that because he's actually been all right for them. When you look at his game against Washington, his game against on Thanksgiving against the Giants, Dallas is able to score points.
Mm-hmm.
I I think this game will go over the 49.5 because I think the Bengals are also going to score points. This is where I
Yeah.
got to like I mentioned the Zimmer thing with Pettin. Where I'm like, I'm not really interested in Mike Pettin a little bit just because of what Mike Zimmer has done in Dallas. It's been bad. I don't know if it's been Bengals bad, but it's been bad. They
Yeah.
should be able to run the ball a bit because Dallas front's just a little bit weak. That's their weak point, I would say. Um, I think game goes over. I think the Cowboys cover. I think the Cowboys win outright.
Yeah.
I think it ends up like 31-28 in another game that's like, oh wow, this Bengals offense. But then they lose it on some crazy voodoo because they have the opposite Chiefs voodoo where just bad things happen towards the end of the game rather than all good things for them. They need good voodoo. They need the voodoo where the Chiefs are like the Chiefs opponents are like fumbling snaps at the end of the game to lose. They're not getting that. And when they
No.
do, their kicker misses. So I 31-28 Cowboys. I feel pretty good about the Cowboys covering in this. I could see the Bengals winning in a big win, like a
Every
blowout
week.
even. Like it's not hard to see how that happens. It's just I haven't seen them do that much this year. And I have seen them lose a lot of close games this year. So I've got a bit of a winning streak just by betting against this team. So I'll keep doing that.
Okay, I'm gonna get my score in just a moment. I'm not gonna break it down or anything like that because nobody really cares. It's Monday Night Football. The Bengals are out of it. It's not going well, and Dallas isn't very good either. But I want to ask you one question before I just give my score. Would you rather you look at the season as a whole? Say the defense was still the defense. It was bad and Joe Burrow was playing insane, but the defense is absolutely terrible. But the ball bounced the other way. They had the craziest luck. They had Chiefs luck this whole entire season, and they only had 3 losses on the year. They were going to make
Yeah,
the
if
playoffs.
I'd rather watch a team with 3 losses, yeah.
No, 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 no. Let me ask you this. But it was like an absolute terrible defense, like just the luck. They had the
Sure.
voodoo luck. And they get in, and it was still a terrible roster on the defensive side of the ball. You're just like, how in the world did they have any luck? It was just crazy stuff. They get in, they win, they don't even win the division. They get in the playoffs as a wild card and they get just stomped on in the playoffs. Would you rather have that happen or would you rather this team just all out the rest of the last 5 games? Season's over, they don't win another game, and that means changes. That makes the front office make moves. That means you're not bringing back that stale defense the following year because you found a way to still get to the playoffs. Which one would you rather have if you only had those 2 choices?
I mean, I guess if they're going to get crushed in the playoffs, I'd rather they just lose.
That's where I'm going
I've
right now.
seen yeah, I've seen enough Bengals teams make it to the playoffs and then just get trounced. So I'm good on skipping the Marvin Lewis years and just having a year where you're going to reset things. Now, if you just ask, they make the playoffs, but it's incredibly lucky and you don't think they're a really good team, I would still rather make the playoffs.
Yeah, I still want to watch them on Wild Card Weekend.
Not, it's not even that. It's just if they made the playoffs, they have a chance to go on a heater, like the 07 Giants or something, where just the defense clicks a little bit. Lou gets them going, and the offense is awesome because it's the offense. But if you're telling me like, yeah, and they go get trounced in the playoffs, I'm like, no, I'm skipping the playoffs part of that because that's not fun.
Okay. That's the only way I'm getting through these next 5 games is I keep telling myself if the ball would have bounced a different way in those games, and then their defense is terrible and they would have stuck with everybody and only made a few moves. I want them to be absolutely embarrassed as a front office right now. Like that's how I want these next 5 games to go. I want the front office to be embarrassed, the coaching staff to be changes. And I'm not saying head coach because I don't think they'll change Zach Taylor as head coach, but other moves. I want this to just be like an eye opener for them. And you know what? The good news is it's going to be on Hard Knocks. So they're going to be watching all of this behind the scenes too, for all of us to see everything that is happening there. I didn't watch the first episode. We can talk about that later on our podcast next week, but I'll just say the Bengals fall 28-31. Cade York could have hit the field goal at the end to tie it up to take it to overtime, and he misses.
Gets blocked.
It's over. It's over. That's just what happens. But you know what? There's no stress going into this game. I'm just going to watch it for the vibes. And make sure you check out Mike's stuff over on Bengals Talk and over on Twitter, Bengals_Sands. You can follow me at LNDS Patterson. Bengals get back to practice on Thursday and Friday, and they'll play a football game on Monday night. Simpsons version, if you want to watch that. But thank you as always for listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati.